Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another edition of Hilaal Live. My name is Luqman Shadrack, all the way from the Cape Town studios. I trust you all had a wonderful long weekend. Congratulations. I think it was Bok Friday, as they said, and all the Bok supporters are really appreciating that holiday. It's Monday, a brand new week, and we always have great topics to discuss on Hilaal Live. Today, our guest has her BA in social work, master's in mental health, also diploma in marriage guidance and counseling, forensic assessment of child victims of abuse, and a doctoral thesis on young offenders, specialized in GBV courses at the Johns Hopkins University, and also through UNICEF and DSD. Now, she currently holds a position as the director of the Teddy Bear Foundation Board as a clinical director. Joining us via Zoom, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Omar, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for this great opportunity.
My absolute pleasure. My pleasure. Dr. Omar, our topic today, viewers, and we'll have our WhatsApp line open as well, where you could correspond with us and let us know your thoughts about this very, very important topic. Our WhatsApp line, 079 085 11. 079 085 2511. We'll only take WhatsApp, no telephone calls, unfortunately. Now, today we're discussing the 16 days of activism. We would like to also stress that some of the topics or the nature of the discussion may be sensitive to some viewers, but it's for a good cause. We do know that the 16 days of activism started on the 25th of November till the 10th of December. However, this is a topic I think we should talk about all year round. And Dr. Omar is a specialist in this very topic as well. Dr. Omar, can you maybe, for our viewers' sake, maybe explain the significance of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and why this very topic is so important to our community?
Shukran, Brother Luqman. I just want to say that we do not believe in 16 days of activism. It's 365 days of activism. Every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week matters in the lives of women and children. However, we certainly do honor the 16 days to enable, to empower, to conscientize communities out there of the challenges so many women and children face and are often left to their own vices, where they are victims, they become survivors, sometimes leading to death, because femicide is becoming very prevalent. And I think these are the reasons that we try and highlight for people during the 16 days of activism. So it has a lot of significance, but at the same time, we propagate that it's 365 days. We also need to look at what was the theme for this year for the South African nation, accelerating actions to end gender-based violence and femicide, leaving no one behind. And I think that is critical, because if we look at the structural drivers of violence, we know that toxic masculinity, the patriarchal system, is so deeply entrenched. And if we look at the gendered norms and stereotypes and the preferential privileges given to specific genders, I think that is something also very deeply entrenched in all our different communities, religious groupings, socioeconomic groups, etc. And I think this is why we speak to leaving no one behind and giving the voiceless a voice. So that is what 16 days is all about. If we look at the United Nations slogan on the 16 days, they speak to unite, invest in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, and it's #enough. So I think that, we need to just be aware of why we are honoring, commemorating the 16 days.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Omar. In your work and in your activism that you've done over the very many years, How would you define and maybe communicate what constitutes gender-based violence to our larger community? Because in some regard, people are still not getting the message and are still not highlighting what's happening in our communities.
So let's break that down a bit. Let's unpack it, because violence comes in different shapes and forms. It's not always tangible and visible as well. So it could be physical, where there's physical abuse. It could be emotional abuse. It could be gaslighting, making the person feel that they're delusional, having hallucinations, making them feel that they are not in a sober state of mind. It could be economic abuse, where there's a controlling partner or spouse who takes charge and leaves no room for independence, suppresses the autonomy and independence of the victim. Now, it could also be that there's threats, coercion, intimidation of leaving or deserting or abandoning the victim. So as I say, it comes in different shapes and forms, and we also need to understand why I'm saying unpacking, that it's not something that is a given or something that's a norm, but it's practiced and often abused to the extent where the victim or survivor is subjected to sexual abuse, even in a marriage, tormented, threatened and blamed for many things that go wrong. And the verbal abuse, putting the person down all the time, ignoring something that one would think, no, that's not abuse. That constitutes abuse. It's emotional abuse. And name calling or saying to the person, you'll never get it right. You are so useless. Where do you come from? But like just basic things like that, which one may take for granted. All of that constitutes abuse, and it's part of the domestic violence. When we talk about gender-based violence, that is something that we need to recognize, that it is a reality, it is a fact, and often we find that females in a marriage feel that this is their lot, this is what they're expected to tolerate, regardless of how much pain and trauma it inflicts on the victim. They are afraid to come out, stand up, speak out and break the silence, because they feel that they would be seen as failing or failure in their marriage, unable to fulfill their conjugal rights. I think also having extramarital relationships where the victim is aware of it, but she's threatened into silence, fear that the husband may leave her, abandon her, leave her with the children. So these are all, different shapes and forms of gender-based violence that often women and children are faced with, particularly females.
Of course. We're chatting to Dr. Shaheda Omar. I may warn our viewers that some of the topics or the discussion tonight may be very sensitive to some viewers, and although that may be the case, we would like you to correspond with us on the WhatsApp line if you'd like to ask Dr. Omar any questions. 079 085 2511. Let us know your thoughts and we'll pose your questions to Dr. Shaheda Omar. Dr. Omar, with regards to our justice system, do we have sufficient assistance for those, and I'm using, for a lack of better words, victims that are challenged with gender-based violence? Do we have the support structure to assist? And that's the first part. And the second part is our justice system equipped enough to combat some of the cases that are coming through?
So thank you for asking such an important question. Now we know who are the first responders. Usually the first responders are law enforcement officials, so your SAPS officials. However, we also need to understand that if we look at the allocation of resources and personnel, we look at skills, dedicated and designated staff within law enforcement, we find that because of the volumes, we find a lot of burnout, a lot of the officers go on stress leave, and cases are not followed through. Often, even in terms of sensitivity and reception of receiving a victim or the victim with her children. They often frowned upon. Officers are not sensitized, not knowing how to communicate, not know how to relate, and often would actually turn a lot of the victims away. That is something that we have experienced on the ground, working with victims and survivors, where we've had to accompany them after their failed attempts to receive support from the first responders, where it's SAPS officials. So, I think that is something that we need to realize. There are pockets of excellence, but again, it's few and far between.
Right.
Then you asked another question about the justice system. I think this is also of grave concern. If we just cast our minds to COVID-19, post-COVID-19, the DNA backlog, all the forensic assessments that have been sitting in Pretoria, if we look back at the approximate numbers, the statistics, we know that last year there was 250,000 forensic or DNA kits that had to be addressed. But post that, we are finding that even so a lot of the cases have been postponed, and the backlog then has a knock-on effect even within the justice system.
Absolutely.
Where a lot of the victims have to wait. We've had cases from last year, November, and they still have not been addressed this year, November.
Wow.
So these victims are subjected to secondary victimization and trauma because there's no closure, there's no follow-up, and justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
So I think this is something that we need to be aware of, because unfortunately, as many courts we actually don't have the resources or the backup to meet the backlog that we are faced with.
100%. I fully agree with you there as well. We're going to take a very short ad break. When we come back, we chat a bit more to Dr. Shaheda Omar. Please be part of the conversation. Share your thoughts on the WhatsApp line 079 085 2511. You are still watching Hilaal Live. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us on channel 347, all the way from the Cape Town studios. I'm Luqman Shadrack. Very important topic we're discussing today, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And joining us via Zoom is Dr. Shaheda Omar. Doc, thanks so much once again for joining us. For those of our viewers that's just tuned in, Dr. Omar has been actively involved in various campaigns to highlight the atrocities that our communities have been faced with. Dr. Omar, I think that's a very important point that I may want to bring up now as well. I think the misperception is that a lot of these crimes only occur in our disadvantaged areas. But not so. I think there's a huge rise in the more affluent areas as well. Have there been any concrete statistics around why this has been so? We all know that communities, more affluent communities, are plagued with various stresses that the world has to offer.
So you raise something very critical here. I think nobody's exempted from the scourge of domestic violence or gender-based violence, regardless of race, creed, color, socioeconomic status, any grouping. I think nobody's exempted from the scourge. If we just look at the statistics, and of course, the statistics only reflect the ones that are brought to the attention of the authorities. 1 in 5 or 1 in 3 women are victims of intimate partner violence. And just from our experiences, clinical experiences, I was having this conversation last week with another CEO from another organization, and we were talking of affluent, successful women who are holding huge portfolios and positions in companies, even in the corporate sector, who have actually come forward seeking intervention support on the very victimization or the gender-based violence that they've been subjected to. So if we look at our statistics from the April till September this year, we know more than 27,000 women have been victims of assault whether it's grievous bodily harm and other forms. And again, if we look at women that have been murdered, yes, what we are seeing, it's more frequently in specific population group.
Yeah.
But then we must also understand the demographics. It's representative of the demographics of the population. So, and again, if we look at the cases of rape, and this includes all population groups, all classes, all races, we're looking at just under 20,000 rape cases that were reported.
Sure.
So I want to bring it to the attention that more than 24,000 of domestic violence that were reported included over 400 murders.
Wow.
And 587 attempted cases of murder. So you have to just look at the landscape and appreciate the extent and the gravity and the enormity of what we are currently faced with. But just to reiterate, that gender-based violence and femicide affects each and every one. It's not my problem, it's not your problem, it's our problem.
Absolutely.
And I think that is what when the UN speaks to you, we need to unite and stand together to fight the scourge of violence.
Absolutely. We're chatting to Dr. Shaheda Omar around the 16 days of activism around gender-based violence. Do be part of the program on our WhatsApp line, 079 085 2511. That's the all-important WhatsApp number that you can send us your message, comment, or even a question you have for Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar, so the question then beckons is, year on year, this seems to be getting worse. This seems to be, not lightening the load of everybody involved, whether it's the social workers, whether it's, and this is such a grieved trauma that these, victims go through. And one of the work that you've done, and I'm very impressed about it, is that there isn't a time limit where people can report these cases. For example, the trauma that someone endures for so many years may only hit 5, 10, 15 years later when somebody's ready to deal with it. And that's very important, I think, in our communities as well. However, the question then beckons is, what do we do? What more needs to be done in order to lessen some of these cases?
Well, I think firstly, awareness, conscientizing people about their rights and responsibilities, ensuring that there are resources, strengthening the existing resources and platforms that are supposed to be in place. And if we just look at the first National Gender-Based Violence Summit that was organized by the Office of the Presidency, President Ramaphosa, identified gender-based violence as a pandemic. If we cast our minds from 2018 and we are now at the end of 2023, in response to that last year, November, there was a second summit. And in the second summit, children's voices were also brought into place. But at the second summit, it was also reflecting on looking at how best, or what are the strengths from the first summit, the 6 pillars that were developed and the emergency response action plan. So the national strategic plan that was developed and of course implemented. And if we look at the resources and a lot of the work that has been done, firstly in terms of accountability, justice, prevention, care, response and support, economic empowerment and research, all relating to gender-based violence. So we have seen that there has been a growth, but again, it's about accelerating these actions. The theme last year was acceleration, amplification. And I think that's looking at best practice models, what has worked, what has not worked to accelerate it, what has worked well, amplified and accountability, failure to fulfill their mandates, different government departments, CSOs, whoever has been assigned certain responsibilities need to be held accountable.
And I would imagine with yourself being so close to various campaigns, were there any success stories that you would like to maybe tell our viewers about? I mean, are there avenues where we are winning the war against GBV?
So thank you for asking that question. We had a meeting last week. It's a monthly meeting where all 6 pillars get together, people that are affiliated to the pillars. And so we've been doing these 100-day challenges. And just to share one success story, that in the Eastern Cape, a group of lawyers, NPA, the National Prosecution Authorities, prosecutors, and paralegals, everybody got together and started working on backlogs and how they improved it, where they worked outside of their work time. So I think these are things that we actually need to celebrate and show that it is possible, that we can, justice can come through, it can be accelerated, and people can get closure and there can be protection. I think currently, as we speak, with regard to the protection orders, there's also concern around the fact that everything is based on the, in the English language for purposes of escalating it and taking it to another level. But what the challenge we've experienced is that a lot of victims are women. English is not their first language, right, regardless of whether it's an Indian, African, of Asian origin. I think these are challenges, and often they don't comprehend or understand what the interim protection order means, and when it expires and they're being subjected to further abuse, they don't have any recourse to action because they feel that they have complete safety, they are protected. So again, these are things that are going to be addressed. And this is where, when we talk about 100-day challenges within the National Strategic Plan, the the end gender-based violence meetings that we have, these are the things that we work on. We are also another success story, violence against children. As an advocate for children's rights, we have actually started training, sensitizing people on how to work with children, how to communicate with children. And it's an intersectoral training made available to all people that come into contact, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's National Prosecution Authority, or it could be other organizations. So it's about teaching them on how to work with children, how to respond to children, and also understanding the cognitive challenges, the lack of understanding when it comes to specific ages or milestones. So there are lots of opportunities. I think people on the ground are trying, but a lot more needs to be done. So Absolutely. It's all work in progress.
Absolutely. Dr. Shaheda Omar, Jazakallah so much for affording us your time and shedding light on a very important topic that's plaguing our communities for decades now, if not even more, even longer. Jazakallah for all the great work that you and your various teams and organizations do. And we so look forward to chatting to you in the near future. Hopefully hearing that this has now decreased over the years as well. Jazakallah so much. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That's Dr. Shaheda Omar chatting to us about 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We all know we've just come out the campaign, but it's an all-year project that needs to be spoken about. Jazakallah so much for watching and sharing. After the break, we chat to a youngster who has achieved very great results and one of the top matriculants at a school right here in Cape Town. You're still watching Hilaal Live.